Before showing you part of YouTube really, which Richard shows about the Torah code, being light, let us see interesting table, quite important, one of the most significant ones on the codes. Now what you have here in this table is once in the Torah. You have Sofen Atanach, which is Bible code, and you have the people involved, quite small skips. You have RIPS here, and Doron with whom really work together. Inside the word code, it's amazing. In the word code you have Doron. Then you have the year really when they started working on it, which is 5736. And also the most interesting thing is that it appears with the story of the ephod. You see the ephod here? Breastplate when it comes, which is the idea of the ephod, very similar to the idea of the codes when things were revealed through letters, as we know quite well. So altogether, very interesting, significant table, as it is only once in the Torah, and RIPS quite small skip, and the same thing, Doron with whom he was working in the year, which is 573. So very interesting and significant tables about the code, and so we can appreciate more really what we have in this interesting show. So let us see part of it.
Discuss the latest Torah codes that I received from Professor RIPS and Rabbi Glazerson that concerned what appeared to be an assassination attempt on his life. This was a very unusual thing to get such a table from Professor RIPS. He doesn't make predictions using the codes, but this table came up with a p-value of 2 million to 1, and so he was concerned. I received a table from him that had D. Trump next to it, a vertical line of text that said, name of his assassin. We then emailed each other about the idea of searching within that same line of text to see if any names came up. Professor RIPS wanted a little time to use a new piece of software to search this area for names. While all of this was going on, Rabbi Glazerson happened to be in town, and the two of us also examined the table, looking for clues. Glazerson had to leave town shortly afterwards, and back in Israel he sent me a table that had a date, December 5th, or the month Kislev, the Hebrew calendar, which also fell on the same day of the 5th, rather unusual. Both Professor RIPS and Rabbi Glazerson were concerned that something might happen to President-elect Trump. Years ago, there was another table that seemed to predict a terror attack in Tel Aviv, and after praying about it at the Western Wall, Professor Daniel Michelson and Professor RIPS worked on that table and discovered that the terrorists would be arrested. That indeed happened. So these Trump tables were causing concern. Glazerson asked if I would contact President-elect Trump and get him this warning. I told him that I didn't personally know Donald Trump and didn't know how to get an email to him. He believed that perhaps we could go through Jared Kushner, Donald's son-in-law, who married Ivanka. Through a connection in New York, I was sent Jared's email address. It's common knowledge that Jared is an Orthodox believer. I composed the most rational letter on the subject that I knew how to write, knowing that I was sending it to someone who already had a knowledge about the Torah. The tables about Trump and Cyrus were at the beginning of my letter, and later on I included both the RIPS tables and Glazerson's tables with the threat of murder. At the risk of sounding like some conspiracy theorist, I sent the note saying that all of this was found in a 3,329-year-old text. December 5th has now come and gone, and nothing we know of happened, fortunately. The table did say a threat, which could have meant that there may have been attempts and threats that the Donald may have gotten, but the public wouldn't be informed of. We don't know. However, we do know that the Torah codes often reflect what is happening at the time, and during this whole process, there was graffiti being scrawled onto walls saying, "Kill Trump," and also "Kill Trump supporters." None of these things were known at the time to RIPS when he did the tables. So again, the Torah codes are filled with both actual facts as well as the zeitgeist of the times. We don't always know or can tell the difference. but it seems to me it's better to err on the side of possibilities than to ignore what the codes are saying completely. Often we're surprised by these tables, since the information they impart is often like a reflection of actual world news.
Science, the supernatural, biblical prophecy, global events that threaten to rattle the very foundation of human existence. Critical examination of the most important issues facing today's modern world. Welcome to the Sharpening Report.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Sharpening Report, and I am so honored to bring to you again my good friend Richard Shaw, who's been sharing some amazing things with me, and we were talking about his last visit and the astonishing Bible codes that he shared with us last time, and a lot of other things. How are you, Richard?
I'm good. How are you doing, James?
Fantastic. It's a beautiful Friday evening here. I was just saying Shabbat is beginning. What a wonderful way for those who celebrate the Sabbath to kick it off.
Yeah, I've still got a couple hours before it technically hits here in Los Angeles. Well, we've been doing a lot of research on the Torah codes, and I don't know, but a lot of people seem to be getting really interested in what's coming out of the Torah codes right now, especially when I start getting codes from Professor RIPS in Jerusalem, because that doesn't happen very often for him to do that, unless he really feels like he needs to send me something. And I think I showed some of these to you before.
Absolutely astonishing.
They are really amazing. And maybe what I should do is kind of explain a little bit about what the codes are once again, because some people still don't know why I'm even interested in it and why I think it's valid. Back in, the search for a code in the Torah has been going on literally for the past 1,000 years. And there was a rabbi that found a code hundreds of years ago that helped them figure out. It was a 44-letter skip code that gave him clues to mathematically calculating the moon's orbit, which they needed to grow their crops, that kind of thing. Right. And it wasn't until the 60s that NASA had computers good enough to get it a couple more decimal places. So that was found on the Torah codes. And the interesting thing is that, people write and say terrible things in the comment section on YouTube, and I'd like to address that real quick. People say, "Oh, you're deceived. This is satanic. This is, like divination. It's numerology. It's like it's evil, and it's really not. I mean, I didn't put the codes in the Torah.
Exactly.
We're just trying to find them. They're basically there already. And if they're in the Bible, then I think you got to really be careful saying things like that, because it's basically you're kind of showing your own ignorance.
Yeah, true.
Like to say that, but it's true. And so what I was trying to explain is that back in the 50s, there was this rabbi named Michael Weissmandel, who was this mathematician, a really excellent guy. I mean, he even worked on cracking the Enigma code, from what I've heard.
Cool.
So this guy was an astonishingly good mathematician, and he was a Jew. And so his family was all killed in Auschwitz. And so after the war, in the early 50s, he moved to New York. He died I think it was 1957. So this body of work he did was very brief. It was like maybe 6-7 years at the most. but he had always thought that there was a code in the Torah ever since he was a teenager. And he finally came across this idea, well, maybe if I skip so many letters, something will happen. So he starts on the first letter, Tet, in the book of Genesis. And of course, in the Hebrew text, you have to count backwards. And I'm not an expert in Hebrew. I'm not saying that I am. I'm a filmmaker. You have to excuse me. My throat's a little messed up today. But this has always intrigued me, and I kind of fell into this group of rabbis from the most unorthodox thing that happened. And that's another story, but I had never anticipated getting to know these guys. And so when I learned about Weissmandel, that he started all this by counting with his finger. So with the first letter Tet in Hebrew, he skipped every 50 letters, and in the book of Genesis, it spelled the word Torah. So then, well, I'll try that in the book of Exodus, he's thinking, and see what happens. He does the same thing in the book of Exodus. Counting with his finger, it spells Torah. So it's happened now twice. That's an enormous clue, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
So then he tries it again in the book of Leviticus, and come to find out it doesn't work. So he goes, oh, well, maybe Leviticus, it's the book of the law. Maybe it has something else. So he looked for, he might have looked for the word Hashem, but I think he ended up finding the word Yahweh every 7 letters in the book of Leviticus.
Wow.
So then he went back to Numbers. So you got Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. So you got Torah, God, and now we got to go to Numbers. So he tries the 50-letter skip again in the book of Numbers, and he gets the word Torah again, but spelled backwards. We're just like, what? So then he tries it again in the book of Deuteronomy, and the 50-letter skip didn't work. So he goes, oh, yeah, that's right. Moses wrote the book of Deuteronomy, so he doesn't get the perfect number 50. Now, you have to understand, these rabbis put a lot of significance on numbers. They just do. I mean, they know what each number means and why it's shaped the way it is, and that 50 is like the number of God, it's like the perfect number. Well, Moses doesn't get that, so he knocked off one digit, made it 49 letters, counted 49 letters, and got the word Torah again. In Deuteronomy, backwards. So you got Torah,
Backwards
Torah,
twice.
God, Torah, Torah. Now I got a little graphic here. I'll switch screens just so you can see this. Now,
Right.
the only reason I'm doing this, James, is because it seems like a ridiculous notion to be involved in this stuff unless you have a good reason. And can you see my graphic here?
Yes. I'm so
We
glad
got-
you got that. Can you shrink it a little bit at the bottom?
Or do you want me to raise it a little bit?
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Right
Or
there.
okay.
That's perfect.
Okay. Basically, you got Torah, Yahweh, backwards Torah. So it's like the word Torah is reflecting to this prayer book, which is Yahweh. So you have 50 letters skip, 50 letter skips, 7 letter skip, 50 letter, and 49 letters.
Wow.
Now, that's just counting with your finger.
I'm so glad you brought this graphic up. If I could put this in, because this is what's astonishing to me. You tell me what you think, but you were sharing this last time. But I'm seeing visually, there are some people who say, and I follow this too, that if you look geographically from Jerusalem, the direction of the writing of the general people points towards Jerusalem, just like the spelling of these words. If they're writing from left to right or right to left, if you go east or west of Jerusalem, do you see what I'm saying? It's astonishing.
yeah.
It mirrors this very much so. Same pattern.
This is like equidistant letter sequencing, it's called. And then there's another form called gematria, and they're different. But this is just in the Torah. I mean, it's in there. and no computer necessary.
It's like
or anything else.
everything points to God. Even geographically, our writing, in America, our writing points to Jerusalem going from left to right, if you're looking at a map. So that's just a parallel I was saying. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And the seven distance on the letter for God is also very significant. Even I can see that, and I'm no rabbi.
Yeah, it's like a perfect number. What's interesting is the rabbis are really interesting because this year is 5777 in the Hebrew calendar.
למה אתה קם בחמש בבוקר וכל העולם עוד ישן? למה אתה מזיע, משקיע? למה אתה מתאמן גם באמצע ינואר? דוחף את עצמך לקצה שוב.
77 in the Hebrew calendar. They're like the year of completion.
Yeah.
They're all looking for Messiah this year. It's not 2017 for us yet, but it's already 2017 for them. It's just, I don't know, it's just...
Right. The people that you were talking about that say, oh, this is, you're trying to do fortune telling or something like that, they absolutely do not get it. It's just taking it for what it is astonishing enough.
Yeah. So the whole process died for a few years because there was no way to really continue doing this. Here, I'll go back to normal screen here. There was no way to do this because it was too time consuming. Now, he had some interns that was working with him, and they were sitting there counting, and he has a book he's put out. I don't know if it's still available or not, but now we get into the whole idea of End to Darkness, which is the name of my film. Back in 1976, there was this rabbi that Professor RIPS knew. The rabbi's name was Yaniv. And Rabbi Yaniv told Professor RIPS about this code. Excuse me. And so Professor RIPS got the book of Weiss Mendel's findings and started to realize, we could write a computer program to search this. Now, this was like, you're probably not nearly old enough to remember what it was like in 1976, but that's when computers were just coming out. And when I was in my 20s, I would go to the music store, and there'd be this Apple II computer with green screen with little flickering characters, and it had like a 4-track music sequencer playing on the screen. And it was like you could control your MIDI instruments through an Apple II. And, it was like really, really tweaky. It was like little numbers would kind of form on the screen, and I thought, well, I don't want to do that. That's just too weird. It's just like I'd be a total computer geek. I couldn't even enjoy making the music. A couple of years later, they came out with the Macintosh. A whole different experience. It actually, little notes popped up on the screen as you're playing them on the keyboard. It was like magical, okay? So things happened really quick.
Yeah.
So Professor Rips got with 2 other guys. One was Doron and Joab Rosenberg. Now these were mathematicians and software programmers, and the 3 of them hammered out a piece of software that would run on an Apple II, because that's all they could get their hands on. Well, back in those days, there was another computer called a Commodore 64.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, it had like little cartridges you'd put into it that would have just a tiny bit of RAM, and each one had a program. So if you wanted to figure out, your mortgage rate, there would be like a little plug-in module you'd stick. I mean, they didn't have like downloadable software applications back then. They were like plug-in modules, kind of like synthesizers in those days, where like you'd want a bunch of new patches, they were called, and Roland would have this little box, and you'd plug it into your your keyboard, and bam, you have
That
like
was considered
another 32
cutting edge.
patches. Yeah, cutting edge. It was like
Back then.
a little, ROM chip that would go in there.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way the computers were, except for the Apple IIs. They could load some of it into its internal memory. I don't know how much memory it had. I would guess less than or equal to 128K of RAM, most likely in those days, which is like nothing.
Sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah. Now you just sneeze.
You can fit all that and more on your cell
128K. Little tiny audio clip. Oh, that's like 300K. I won't even fit. So imagine how hard it would be to encode the Torah into the computer, all those letters. So they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
They could only put part of the book in.
Yeah.
So they did part of the book of Genesis. And just out of curiosity, they tried some of this stuff. And
boy.
It actually worked. And I asked Professor Rips once when we were at Herolic's house, I said, so what was the first code that you found? Because he confided in me, he said at one point, he said, I thought I was going crazy looking for this. Because it just seemed kooky.
Right.
Like, what am I doing this for? And he's really a genius.
This is the kind of, even if you're a genius, this is the kind of thing you need colleagues brought in just to keep you grounded, Like, you're saying this too, right?
I know, it's really, it's very fascinating. Once you get into it, it's like, wow, what else is really in there?
Yeah.
And no one really understands. People write and they'll say, can you look my name up in the codes? It's like, well, yeah, it might take 3 weeks of work to do that. No one gets that. So please don't ask me to do that.
When you consider the author of the book, I was just listening to Chuck Missler, something he said that ties right into this. Consider the author. He is outside of time. But yet, this is for us. So he is able to demonstrate and put his authenticity forward in that he's the author. I mean, to let you know this is him. He had to. This is the whole purpose of it. I think is just so we will believe. That's as simple as that. That's how I view it. Very simply.
Yeah, I think there was something going on Mount Sinai that was really interesting, very fascinating, with God and his associates, let's say.
I totally agree.
And they were, he'd say, do a blah, 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 and he's giving him instructions of what to do, and, oh, give this to Moses, he's going to need that, and do this, and do that, and they would just hammer this stuff out.
Yeah.
Because the angels heard about that. Oh, it's just a movie. Well, where do you get these ideas from? I mean, there's like, I could see this thing up in the sky. And then I stuck the camera on the hood and was driving down the street, and
this is something that's an interest to many of them, but they can't really state it publicly.
Right, I'm just trying to get my monitor to work again here.
Let's just say I've had professional confirmation that you are onto something. That so much of what we don't see is in the ultra or infrared spectrum, and you have to wonder what we do see. Is it just they're just letting us see? Maybe they want us to see at these other times. Who knows?
But what's interesting, everything's back up, and I apologize for the delay, but at least I got to show you what I'm trying to demonstrate here.
Yeah, that's a good demonstration.
There are clips on YouTube that are fake, but fake UFOs.
Absolutely.
And then there are clips that are real. Now, there's this guy that saw UFOs at night using basically infrared cameras. Still working with a thimble for a brain. The word foundation appears, and the encoded word Hillary falls right over that word foundation. It's phenomenal.
Pierces
And
it
then,
right through the middle.
right here, really corrupted. That's what this line of green and red letters says, with the same skip. Now, if you count, I mean, there's like 1, 2, 3. See, the same number of rows are between
Yeah.
each letter. So this whole sentence has the same skip, and the skip is 136. Now, the way that you can figure this out, Hillary, her name was only 34 skip, every 34 letters. Now, if it says minus 34, if you can see my cursor here, James, that means it comes up backwards. Minus 136 means it's backwards. 1 means it's in, there's no skip. It's just in the Bible.
Right. Gotcha.
And this is what Professor Rips found. So then this one, which I think I showed you last time, but it bears repeating. Hillary comes up in this table every 2 letters backwards. This is the word Hillary backwards right here. Right here, every 513 letters forwards. Comey covers up. That's right here. Comey covers up. Comey is the head of the FBI. And then this is really quite amazing. Right here, the brown letters, the same skip, 513 and 513 for the male is right there. The chance of this happening in vertical rows and lined up together are huge. The p-value for this is enormous. And then you've got this, which to me is the most profound of all, because that's servers making use by their foundation. Now, all of those letters are overlapping and intertwined and all in this one row. All of that data is right there.
That's incredible. What book was this found in?
I believe this was in Deuteronomy, if I remember right.
Interesting. That's just absolutely astonishing.
What happened later, about 7 months ago, and I should have straightened this one out so it's centered a little better, but this one here is one that my good friend Rabbi Glazerson discovered.
Take it over to the left just a little bit, please.
This way?
A little bit more. A little bit more. There you go. Now we can see everything.
Will that work?
Yeah. There you go.
All right. This word here, Donald, so the the yellow letters that are stretched apart here, that's the word Donald.
Yeah.
Trump is the red. President is these blue letters here. Sometimes it's hard to fit the English in there. Cyrus comes right up there. United States crosses all of this. And then no one's going to know what this means. Chesvan, that is the Hebrew month for our November.
Wow.
Now,
Interesting.
the 7th of Chesvan is the 8th of November in the Gregorian calendar. So the 7th of Chesvan is really November 8th.
That's outstanding.
I just thought that was amazing. Now, so here we're talking about Cyrus. Now, Cyrus was this king who helped rebuild the temple.
Yeah.
For Israel, right?
Good old Babylonian king.
He was a friend of Israel, and he did all these nice things for Israel. Well,
he made an entry into our Old Testament too, didn't he?
Yeah, I'm going to have to read. I just haven't had time to read the whole book of Ezra. It's really short. It's just I've been really busy. No one can believe how busy I've been lately. But I have something here that you've got to see this.
Cyrus ended up penning, writing a little bit of our Old Testament.
Check this out. Now, this is where we're talking about Cyrus, but this happened before some of the things. It goes into this whole the descendants were, a typical genealogy thing, and who was in Israel at the time, and family records, and all that stuff. So these searched. Can you read this? I'll read it a little more. These searched. This is the book of Ezra, chapter 2, verse 62. These searched for their family records, but they could not find them, and so were excluded from the priesthood as unclean. Then verse 63 says, the governor ordered them not to eat any of the most sacred food until there was a priest ministering with the Urim and Thummim. Now, no no one knows what that means anymore. And they don't tell you about it in church unless you're going to synagogue. And this is where Christians have lost some of this really cool stuff that's actually in our Bibles